to use it, and it will be our choice on whether to capture it and use it as ethanol, as cellulosic diesel, as electricity cogen. That's a choice, or eat it as sugars. It's all energy. So let me give you one example. This is a company out of Israel that's actually turning biomass into sugars, both food-grade sugars and sugars for production of ethanol and other chemicals. If this technology plays out, we'll know in the next year or so whether it does or doesn't. It may become the cheapest one. That, in Brazil, would be a black swan. And when black swans happen and economics change, the investment goes up dramatically. There are many sugar fermentation processes. If they become competitive in chemicals with oil-based chemicals, the investment will go up. And this is very likely to happen. Some companies will succeed, some will fail. But it doesn't matter, because the ones that succeed will be copied again and again and replicated, and they will get most of the investment. Of course, cellulosic fuels. I actually believe the most cost-effective fuels will be thermochemical. They will not be sugars fermentation fuels. And that will happen in the next 2 years at the most. Now, when I say happen, I mean the following. I mean the technology will be proven, so whether it's RABOBANK or BNDES, they are willing to finance the second or third or fourth facility. They won't finance the first one because it's too risky, but copying a facility, they will finance. And that switch will happen overnight if these fuels are cheaper. Now, my forecast is, if you invite me back, maybe I've offended enough people that they won't invite me back, but a year or two from now, the production cost of cellulosic gasoline and diesel will be below 50 cents a liter. 50 cents a liter. Cheaper than sugarcane ethanol, cheaper than corn ethanol, cheaper than soybean biodiesel or palm oil biodiesel. If that black swan happens, as I expect it to happen, then the world of investment will change. The question you ask is, technology, will it work? Does it take too long? As I said in the main session, if we fail, I lose my money. If we succeed, all of us win. And that's a good deal. But more importantly, when it works, and I have no doubt, but you can wait a year or two, and the sooner you start to take a risk, the more prepared you will be to be the first ones to expand and take advantage of these technologies. That will drive lots of global investment. Because once a fuel is competing against gasoline and diesel in the global markets, people would rather buy fuel, gasoline and diesel from Brazil than from Hugo Chavez. That's most of the Western world. They'd rather buy it from Brazil or China or India or Africa, which has huge potential for biomass too, as does in Malaysia and Indonesia and all of Canada. My estimates show that 300 billion liters of ethanol equivalent, I say equivalent because the energy content of each fuel is different. A liter of diesel is the same as 1.7 liters of ethanol in energy. The U.S. alone could produce 300 billion liters, and I have a paper I'll be happy to make available to anybody who emails me. The other great part about this technology, the reason I first got involved in biofuels in 2001, is most technology creates urban jobs, jobs in cities, economic growth in industrial economies. This is one of the few technologies that causes rural development and rural job growth. Most of the job growth in biofuels happens in rural economies, and that's very, very rewarding in a world that's getting increasingly imbalanced. If you went to college, you will start making many times more money than somebody who stayed in a village. And that is very exciting to me personally. Fuel costs. So deciding which technology works. Fermentation technologies may take 8 hours, 16 hours, 24 hours to ferment. Some of the thermochemical technologies will take 1 or 2 seconds. And when your residence time, the amount of time the biomass stays in the process is lower, your capex is lower. Very simple idea. What does your operating cost depend on? How much yield do you get per ton of biomass? That's the major cost, which is the feedstock cost. It also depends on how cheap your feedstock is. So if you can use any feedstock, if you can use cellulose, you can use bark, you can use lignin, you can use leaves, your feedstock costs will be low. Thermochemical processes use all that. Cellulosic processes can only use the cellulose part. And so thermochemical processes produce 50% more ethanol or whatever biofuel you're producing from the same ton of biomass from the same tree. So land is the other issue. Every way I look at it, my estimates show we can get north of 18,000 liters of ethanol equivalent per hectare. That's very, very encouraging. Because then we are not talking about a doubling of ethanol production. We are talking about being able to do 10 times more. Because one, you get more yield per acre because you're just producing the most biomass. Two, many more different types of land can be used. In a dry area, you can use sweet sorghum. In wet areas, you can use energy canes, you can use miscanthus. In some areas, eucalyptus will do well, in others, pine will do well. You can use all of that. So, what are the key metrics in cellulosic? I think the best technologies will be down well below 50 cents a liter. To compete with gasoline and diesel in the broad international market, that's what it takes to get the world excited. When cellulosic fuels are cheaper than oil sands or deep offshore drilling, which I believe will happen in the next couple of years, we will be competing not for $1 billion budget, but the other $50 billion these oil companies spend a year on exploration and production. It's 100 to 150 gallons of ethanol equivalent per ton of biomass. That's about 500 liters of ethanol equivalent per ton. That makes the cost much lower. And I believe there will be more than one technology that will make this successful. And by successful, I mean start being cheaper than $100 per barrel oil without subsidies, and get down to more like $60 per barrel. One of the things we have to learn in any of these technologies, economics always goes through cycles, and the thing I look at is if things change, if the world changes and oil drops to 60, can a company survive for 2 years on cash flow, meet its interest obligations? So we have to look past ethanol and biodiesel and do products the world wants, and then you'll see tens of billions of investment come in per year. We have to do it for both fuels and petrochemicals, and it may be the kind of economy that generates hundreds of billions, maybe 200, maybe 300 billion of extra GDP for Brazil, if we do this right. There are many, many technologies. I won't go through them. And all the ones in greens are all the ones we've tried. You don't need to look at the details, but here's what's important. These are all the oil projects, not ethanol projects, not fuels projects, that I've seen in the marketplace. This was a chart put out by Goldman Sachs out of their oil and gas business. The cost of production, I believe where biofuels will fall is right in the middle there, competing directly with oil sands and deep offshore. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you very much. Creio que as expectativas que todos nós que assistimos às palestras que foram feitas aqui, estamos extremamente satisfeitos por termos levantado problemas que estão a limitar um novo ciclo de investimento no setor. Se eu fosse comentar aqui cada uma das palestras, eu tinha que congratular o BNDES e a exposição que o Cadu fez, especialmente no que tem de novo na sua exposição, que é o programa de inovação do BNDES, que me parece importantíssimo. Tenho que pegar uma frase do Alexandre para caracterizar a sua palestra, e o que me ocorre dizer a um banqueiro como ele é que fiquei encantado de saber que não há limite para os recursos. Significa que todos nós podemos pegar nossas pastinhas e irmos visitar o ITAÚ BBA ou os outros bancos, como o RABOBANK aqui, como o BNDES, para a gente ter direito a esses recursos que eu, por acaso, não estou vendo, mas, enfim, me disseram que existe. O câmbio foi falado aqui, mas não foi falado com a ênfase que os nossos bolsos estão sentindo. A situação cambial brasileira, que só apresenta piora no sentido nosso, de exportadores, por causa que os fundamentos da economia brasileira continuam a melhorar e os fundamentos dos países desenvolvidos continuam a piorar, e, portanto, a vantagem relativa nossa é grande, e a menos que a gente conseguisse colocar a taxa de juros nossa lá embaixo, coisa que é impossível por causa das pressões inflacionárias, nós não temos outro caminho, e não adianta querer que o real não valorize, porque o real, na minha visão, continuará a valorizar, e eu não vi a ênfase devida ser posta nesse fator que tão mal tem causado aos nossos custos, sejam de investimentos, sejam os nossos custos operacionais. Fiquei um pouco assustado com o Andy, quando o Andy falou como um banqueiro. O banco tem medo de alavancagem, a memória nossa ainda está fresca dos nossos problemas havidos pós-crise de 2008, a atratividade de preços de produtos e o papel do câmbio torna bem difícil você imaginar preços de 23, 25 centes a libra peso em Nova York por 5 anos e R$1 do jeito que está. Será que dá para financiar um projeto desse? Será que um projeto dessa natureza atrai investidor? Na qualidade de procurador de investidor que tenho atualmente, vejo com dificuldade a resposta a essas questões. Mas eles me dizem que dinheiro não é problema. O Plinio ressaltou com muita propriedade a falta de definição de objetivos. Citou exemplos claros na política fiscal, mas não são só nisso, e pergunta, no fundo, quanto tempo nós vamos parar para perder oportunidades. O meu receio é que o fato de a gente perder a oportunidade de mercados sensacionais como o que nós temos. O mercado de etanol do Brasil, gente, é uma coisa inacreditável. É difícil